Welcome to a GBA ranking video. If you don't know what the GBA is, the GBA is a competitive Pokemon league. This season, 14 teams drafted 10 Pokemon each, 1 Mega per team, and they go at it week to week with the foreknowledge of what their opponents are bringing and go head-to-head in a traditional sports league style leading up to playoffs and finals matches throughout the season. This video is going to go through the teams and give you kind of a breakdown of what's been going on in the past week and the general season for them and where I think they stack up as far as power goes. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comments, and things like that to help me improve the videos, make them better. And if you have any questions or interested in the GBA, please leave a comment below. Check out the links in the description and go check out the other GBA videos. And we're having a lot of fun this season. That said, let's go ahead and jump right into the rankings.
Alright, number 1 this week is the Pittsburgh Steelix, staying the same. Pretty much the top 3 are going to stay the same, and their segment's probably going to be pretty short, pretty brief, because it's just winners winning. Pretty much for the most part off of solid gameplay. That's what Swaggerless seems to specialize in. He just plays smart. He comes in with the game plan. He knows all of his safe switches off the top of his head. And he just seems to be really in the mind of what the other coach is going to do, to the point of comfortably going off of a game plan the entire match and not ever having to really panic or deviate. And it seems to be working for him. Number 1, again, team to beat, Pittsburgh Steelix. Number 2, San Jose Sharpedos, staying the same, adding a little differential, not a ton. Fairly close match, all things considered. Sharpedos with a little help from the Hacks Gods with them this week, scoring a couple of crits that probably could have changed the outcome of the game. Regardless, they got the crits, they won the game, they're going to stay at number 2. Number 3, again, Boston Red Sox, just adding on to that differential and doing what they do, winning solidly pretty much every week. 5-1 minus that one bad week. All the top 3 teams right now are at 5-1 as of week 6. The fact that they beat the last place Grand Bulls means it's not enough for them to overtake the Sharpedos or the Steelix, even if they did have the differential to do it. But it's more than enough to keep them in the number 3 spot because, hey, winners winning. A surprise move up this week for the New Orleans Pelipers. It's not really a surprise as I thought they were going to win. It is a surprise because they didn't win, and I'm still moving them up. Pretty much all of the teams around them lost, and I feel like John still has a really good game, and he obviously has an incredibly strong team going into it this year. I think he got thrown a major curveball by the Pokes that were brought by the Jasmine, which kudos to them for really stepping up their game this week. And I think he had some, rough context around his game plan this week. But, being a trooper, sticking out 1:30 a.m. match for him, something like that, I'm not going to say that puts any bias towards me moving him up because it doesn't. He still lost, but the thing is, he still played reasonably well. He made the unfortunate mistake of having a couple of win conditions be not 100% accurate moves, and they were not 100% accurate. They didn't land, and he didn't win because of it. That being said, I think you're going to see him try and rectify that in the future. John seems to do a very good job of learning from his mistakes. He's caught up amazingly well, despite the fact of having a deficit for the year and in his late entry into the league. But he seems like he's caught up. He's incredibly aware of most of the strengths and weaknesses of his team, more so than a lot of the coaches that actually drafted their entire team. And I would not be surprised to see him stay up at the top again, or at the very least float around in the 4 to 6 range. I definitely think at this point, even though it is still technically possible for virtually any team to make it into the playoffs, that the Pelipers are definitely a playoff contender, probably going to steal the wild card spot in their conference. Taking a big swing back up to number 5 after a big swing down to number 9 last week is the Oklahoma City Thunderous, who definitely shook off the bad mental state that they were in for the past 2 weeks and just came out with what they needed this week. They came in with a very simple plan, and just played fundamental Pokemon. He didn't overthink it. He didn't underthink it. He just came in knowing what his win conditions were, knowing what threats were, knowing his basic safe switches, and what he had to do to win the match. And he played the match out that way, and he won for it. And sometimes that's all you need. You don't need to have the big, elaborate double switches. Usually the reason people have to make aggressive plays like that is because they're behind the 8 ball from not playing smart fundamental Pokemon in the early match. And it's usually the guy who is controlling the match via basic, fundamental strength game that sets the pace and forces the other people into making moves. And that's basically what Alex did this week, and Shady was not able to make the moves in order to win the match at the end of the day. So Thundurus shoot back up to number 5. Number 6 remains the Milwaukee Sawsbucks. I thought this was a rough loss for Magnitude. While I think the Sharpedos played a great game, they have a great power team. I think the Sawsbucks have been doing fairly well this season, given a couple of still remaining weak links in their team. But overall, just the level of gameplay for the team has really stepped up from last year. And unfortunately, again, they had some very rough crits that they had to deal with throughout the match, which hurt them, put them in a bad position where they were kind of chasing after some goals that were maybe a little bit out of their reach by that point. That being said, I thought that had a little bit more to do with their loss than them necessarily playing anything wrong, unlike all of the other teams around them. So, I'm going to keep them at number 6, and I think that's a good spot for them. Dropping to number 7 this week is the Arizona Deoxys. The last 2 losses, I didn't hold too heavily against them. I thought they were still solid games, and they really came down to the wire. But I think the frustration finally set in, maybe just a little bit of overall fatigue. And honestly, I think Gubbs didn't play well at all this week. I think the Arizona Deoxys had the keys to victory against the Nidokings, but maybe there's some kind of magic where they just can't beat that team. More than likely, I think it just came down to bad plays. A first turn sacrifice of Snorlax for a self-destruct, letting Mega Pinsir just go down and be beaten by Weavile. They were just kind of plays that were very obviously below the quality that we normally come to see from that team. That could be the new norm for a little while, however. It's hard to tell how coaches shake these things off, what kind of moods they're in, and how that goes. So until I see the kind of turnaround and refocus in the team, regardless of whether they're winning or not, just if they manage to play better than they played this week, they're probably going to start slipping a little bit. And, that's good for the other teams, as it's going to open up more opportunities in their already aggressive conference for playoff spots. Moving back up to that old familiar number 8 spot, the Toronto Maple Leafeons. Kote did basically the same thing that Alex and the Oklahoma City Thunderous did this week, and he just played a solid fundamental game of Pokemon. He happened to work extra well for him, as Fizz had some problems over predicting and just making a few silly plays, whereas Alex just did the safe play, basically 100% of the time, and it paid off. That's the reason they're called safe plays. It's not going to get you a bunch of flashy Okos or, switch-in knockouts or, the fancy double switches and things like that. But it is just going to wear the other team down with minimal damage to your own team, and eventually, over time, if they can't make super aggressive playmaking moves, they're going to lose. And that's what happened. The Leafeons just, over time, did damage to them, hurt them, and wore them down. And they won for that. If Kote can keep that same kind of frame of mind, along with the fact that he has made some interesting trades and is going to have the premier rain team in the league without a doubt, even more so than he already did, the Leafeons could be going for a big mid and late season run back to try and get into those playoff spots. Next week is going to be interesting. It's going to be their second match against the Deoxys, And, that could be a big turnaround point for them. If they can win that after losing the first week, they could go on a streak and, bump up their differential enough to really, set pace for the playoffs. Moving up to number 9 this week is last year's championship, Nido Kings. I keep saying that because you have to understand the context of their, not staggeringly great performance this year in context to being the best team in the league last year. It's been kind of a rough season for them. I do think Danza, Crobat for the win, did a really good job this week. He mixed things up. He played differently, and I think he played better. He went for a lot of safe but slightly aggressive plays. He used Weavile earlier in the game, and it really helped him take out a chunk of the other team. Granted, I think had Gubbs been on top of his game, it might have been a little bit more difficult, but I'm not going to say that he would have lost by any stretch of the imagination. Like I said, I think he played really well. I think he broke down the threats and, the things that were going to give his team pause very well. And I think the way he played this week, Danza had a reasonably good chance of winning no matter what. And regardless of that, he did win based off how he played this week, and that's going to be enough to move him up. If things keep going as they are, I can definitely see him rising back up to the top. But right now, the middle is just an incredibly intense battlefield right now. We have 7 3-3 teams as of this week, so they're all kind of scrapping and vying for that playoff wild card range of scores. And it's going to be interesting to see how they shake up and if the Nido Kings can eventually work their way back up to the ladder and secure a playoff spot again this year in what's seeming to be a much more competitive race than last year. Little slide down to number 10 for the Atlanta Hawluchas. They lost a match this week that they didn't necessarily have to use. While I do think the Maple Leafeons might have had them edged out in power a little weak, really this loss just came down to the Hawluchas overplaying their hand a little bit. Fizz did his research, he did his homework, he came at it knowing the style that they play in, the main threats that they were going to bring, and he just kind of forgot a lot of that stuff and overplayed it. He got caught up in, the overthinking of the Pokemon metagame, and he just overpredicted too many things, despite the fact that he says very clearly he knows that Kotei is generally a safe player, and that's why he lost the match. He made predictions based off a battling style that wasn't the style that the coach played, and he knew that. He absolutely knew that, and he messed up. He did his homework, and he just kind of forgot to take notes and bring them to class the next day for the open note test. And that's a problem, that's a thing he's going to have to work on. I think it's great that he has adapted, he has started doing the research, and I think this is the only team this week that has genuinely said they did their homework, where I can actually see and believe that he absolutely did his homework. He just kind of fell apart and forgot it at the last minute, and, sometimes that happens. Sometimes you get test pressure. Maybe next week when he's studying up for his match, he'll just jot down some quick things like general battle style and keep that on a notepad next to him or something. Something as simple as that could help out a lot and could prevent a loss that happened like it did this week, where mostly Fizz just kind of beat himself and Kotei helped him do it. He kind of handed him some knuckles and watched Fizz punch himself in the face. But not a huge loss. He kept the differential low, which is good. It's going to keep him in the running for a lot of things later on. And I think we'll see them come back and do some work later on in the season. Hopefully the Hawlucha will rise up and do better again next time. A big move up, well, at least for them, to number 11 for the Utah Jasmine, who really impressed the heck out of me this week. I've known Cooper as a great and intelligent battler from the beginning. If you ask any other coach in the league, they'll pretty much tell you the same thing, along with the fact that he's generally regarded as being a super nice guy. But he made a lot of questionable draft choices, banking on his 4th gen knowledge, and 4th gen was a much more bulkier, slower-paced battling style than what we see now. 5th gen just added so many heavy-hitting offensive pokes and hard-hitting options to pre-existing pokes that the bulkier options have really fallen down and are less viable in the mainstream competitive scene. And against mainstream competitive things, they just don't work. And when you're talking about mainstream competitive things, the most similar to that description team in the GBA happens to be the New Orleans Pelicans. So if he didn't shake things up this week, I don't think there was a way he could have won with his bulky team. And Cooper did exactly that. For the first week ever, he brought an offensively focused team, and it absolutely worked. He made aggressive predictions, and they paid off huge. Running Poison Jab on the Gallade and getting that Sylveon kill in the first 3 or 4 turns of the match was absolutely huge, and I was just so impressed. I wanted to stand up and clap for the guy, but I was driving in a car for work, so that would have been a little hazardous. I think that's great. I think he just kept making good plays, had a little bit of help from Hacks and a couple of hits that could have turned things around for him, but regardless, even if he had lost, I think Cooper's finally going to start making waves as of right now. He doesn't have to go full offense every week, but just knowing the fact that now he has the mindset of knowing he can go offensive and that he is willing to go offensive is going to do wonders for that team. And I'm finally glad to just know he's dropped that defensive first plug and play offensive mentality, and that he's treating offense with the mental respect that it deserves. Because in the 6th generation metagame, even with the tweaks that the GBA brings to it, you have to be aware of that. While stall teams can work, they have to function much differently than how they have. And Cooper's just done a great job this week. He brought a lot of things that weren't expected, run some set variations that just worked for him. If he can keep this up, he's got enough reasonably in his range matchups for the rest of the season that he could, cut down on his differential and in theory still make a run for things, and I'm really hoping he does. Big drop this week, number 12, New York Yankees. After the initial breakdowns, I'm going to have a brief little segment about what doing your homework means, and that was partially inspired by the number 12 team, the New York Yankees, and majorly inspired by the number 13 team, which I'll get into in a second. But the Yankees lost this match at Team Preview. There was no reason for them to lose this match at Team Preview. They had one poke in particular that tore a hole through the vast majority of the Thunderous's team, and they didn't bring it. They didn't recognize it. Shady has a problem of bringing the exact same pokes to the match, despite the fact that he does have options to pick from, and he just seems to ignore and write a lot of things off. And that's a problem, Despite having one thing that could have done incredibly well, he actually had a couple of other things that would have also put in a good bit of work had he brought them. And there's just no reason not to bring them. Where was Trevenant? Where was Vaporeon? Why did you bring 3 things weak to fighting if you did your homework and you could have checked to see that the Oklahoma City Thunderous's main offensive force last season and a good bit of this season was, Infernape, a fighting type with fighting priority? Why would you do that? There's just no reason for it. It's a little bit insane. And Shady lost this week. He has a problem. That's, I think, pretty well known at this point. Shady is a slow starter. If he was a Pokemon, he would be Regigigas, and his ability would be slow start. At the beginning of the season, he has trouble getting momentum and getting into the mindset, and eventually he starts to pick up and he does a little bit better. If he struggles with someone the first time, he generally does a little bit better the second time he plays them. This week, unfortunately, was the week after his vacation. The other 2 matches that he had were done early and done back-to-back, and he did well in them because he was still running off momentum from early on in the season. However, I would say the vacation is the equivalent of switching out, and then when he switched back in, his slow start was reactivated, and he performed poorly this week. And I'm not convinced that he's going to necessarily be back up to par next week. Hopefully he is. Hopefully he's learned from this. But I think it might be another week or 2 before he really gets momentum going again. Coming in at number 13 is the other team that I believe botched their homework, despite the fact that they said they did it. It seems to me more like Nexus just looked at the other team and got scared and decided that was his homework. He's running the exact same Mega Gardevoir he has run every week, which for some reason is a Mega Gardevoir running Moonblast over Hyper Voice, which consistently does more damage every time. It runs the exact same coverage moves. Along with that, he didn't do his homework and bring any kind of HP Ice Mienshao, instead relying on Stone Edge, which doesn't do enough damage, despite the fact that the original incarnation of HP Ice Mienshao that was incredibly popular in 5th Gen was designed specifically for the purpose of killing Landorus, and he was going up against the Landorus. He didn't bring it. That's what I'm talking about when I say people aren't doing their homework correctly and that there really isn't an excuse for it. Nexus 13, he doesn't have the worst team. He has a consistent team. He's just not playing it well. For anybody that's trying to give me flack for hating on him, he needs to do better. Number 14, Chicago Grand Bulls. Now I'm going to do a little segment where I explain to you exactly what doing your homework in the GBA means. This is a phrase that's tossed around a lot by a lot of teams, and they say whether they did or did not do their homework that week and what it's going to mean for the matchup. And this week in particular, I got really annoyed at a couple of teams saying they did their homework and failing seemingly to realize what that actually means as far as how much work and what you should walk away from after you've done your homework. Alright, the first part of doing your homework is the very simple, very straightforward. Know the enemy. Know the coach you're playing against. That basic starts off with make sure you know you're playing the right match this week. Nobody seems to have had the problem with that yet, thankfully. I'm sure a couple of people have had a few close calls where they started to plan for something and then caught it before things got too far and managed to rectify that. Now the subsection to that is know the coach you're playing against. This is a little bit time consuming. I don't expect everybody to do it, but I think it's one of the better, more important things. If you have the time, at the very least, check out their other GBA matches and their commentaries and kind of get in their thought process. A good example of this, at least from a commentary standpoint, was that in his homework prep for this week, Fizzy Stardust made note that Kote makes a lot of safe plays. He's a safe playing coach in general. Obviously, there are going to be weeks when he's going to miss it up, so don't just go off this solely as your research for Kote. But he generally tends to make safe plays, and it's not a bad idea to keep that in mind. However, Fizz forgot this after learning it, and he paid for it because he forgot the player. He didn't know who he was playing against. If you know you're playing against someone that makes aggressive plays, then you can probably plan a little bit for that. However, there is also the option that you shouldn't go all in. Another example of that would be the Pelipers and the Jasmine this week, as anyone would have bet that Cooper was going to try and bring another bulky team, and then he didn't. As a coach, he made the call and he changed it up, and it really threw everybody for a curveball, and it helped him get his win. So have an idea of what the coach is going to do, but don't write a Bible and try to live your life by what they've done in the previous weeks. It is a matchup-based format. If things aren't working for them, they're going to change it up, or they might just change it up based on your team. The second part is B. Know his full roster. Don't just pay attention to the main things. Fizz got screwed up pretty hardcore by the dual screen or the light screen Claydol this week because he didn't plan for it. He just didn't think it was a threat at the time. And while it's hard to really cover everything, one benefit of the GBA is they only have 11 things they can possibly bring. You can kind of build your team to counter all of those 10 things if you really try. Or at the very least, you can, assess the threats and assess the possibility of it and maybe run one or two things that just have a few random odds and ends to cover things that aren't major threats to you but still might pop up. And that's something you're only going to get from looking at the full roster and not just looking at the big names and getting scared. That's basically what I heard from the New York Yankees and the Cavaliers this week when they were talking about doing their homework.
It was just, I did my homework, his team's really scary. That's not doing your homework. That's your teacher telling you you have a test tomorrow and you shitting your pants because you don't know anything. Doing your homework means you go out and you learn something and you come in with a game plan and an itemized list. The third part of knowing the team you're playing against, realize what his win conditions are. This can't be stated enough. At this point in the league, a lot of teams have a problem figuring out what their own win condition is, but a major thing you can do to really throw your opponent off is to realize what their win condition is. Figure out what they have that's going to fuck up your team, and then isolate that in the match. Do your best to maneuver and set up extended plays to where you can get that thing in and either take it out or just over time chip it down to a damage point. You know, a lot of teams have, especially with the expansion nature of this year, several of the teams, I would say, have a few heavy hitters that are doing a lot of extra lifting for them. And if you can isolate those things and do work against them, you're going to go a lot farther. Things that just mess you up, you know. Example of this, again, would be the Steelix and the Escavalier this week. Joe Swagaliff was very aware the Mega Gardevoir was the win condition for the Escavaliers. And while he didn't have a solid plan for that, he knew what it was, and he wasn't afraid to value things in their ability to take it out later on. And he also knew what his win condition was, so he was able to bring it in here and there and have things to check Mega Gardevoir and force it back out, just letting it chip off little things while he chipped off more during his time. And that's really all you have to do. If you can isolate their win condition and plan for that, you're going to be doing great. Obviously, this doesn't mean ignore the rest of the things they have. It just means know what their main key to winning is and make it as hard as possible for them to use that and really force them to throw what was their most probable game plan out the window and put them in a more defensive position as opposed to offensively tearing a hole through your team. The second part of doing your homework is know your own team. Know your full roster. That's just a very basic thing. Remember everything you've drafted. Don't forget something just because you've only used it in one match last season or because it's not one of your favorites or because you don't have a good nickname for it. Be aware of your entire roster. I can't tell you how many teams this season have just been bringing the same things week in and out and how much it's hurt them. They just don't seem to be aware that they have a lot deeper options than what they're really bringing. And a lot of things scare the crap out of other teams despite the fact that, you know, they don't seem to be aware of it. It's frightening just how little people are willing to dig in their roster when they just seem to get their minds set on about 7 or 8 of their pokes and just switch out between 3 of them week to week. Again, the best example of that would be Shady, who, like I said, I firmly believe lost this match at Team Preview despite having 2 additional keys to victory that he could have brought on his team that would have just ruined the Thunderous's day had he looked at his roster and played it smart instead of bringing the same things that he brings every week. There's no reason to do that. It's not necessarily about power. It's a matchup-based league. The other example of this would be Nexus, who, to an annoying degree, keeps saying, this is the GBA, we counter-team the hell out of each other, and then doesn't counter-team hardly anyone. Just know your team. The subsection of that would be, know your win condition, look at the other team, and know, hey, this thing takes out 5 of his 10 possible things, I should bring it. Even if he brings the other 5, that's what the rest of your team is for. Build your team around that. You should always have 1 win condition and 1 solid backup and possibly an additional last-ditch effort if you can fit it onto the team. But you should build your team with that in mind. Build it around a concept and a strength, and then just amplify that and use your other pokes to check his weaknesses. It's like any kind of basic team building.
You build something with the intent of this is going to do work. In fact, in the GBA, it's actually easier because you have a smaller sampling of what the opponent's going to bring than you do in a normal team building thing for an entire tier. In an entire tier, you're worried about general type coverage. In the GBA, you just have to worry about specific threats covering yours, and you can plan for that so much easier. It's just annoying how simple it is to build around a win condition in the GBA, yet no one seems to do it aside from a few teams. And most people that I see in their weekly battles aren't even necessarily recognizing their win condition until they're about halfway through the battle, if doing it at all. B, which I mentioned briefly in A, would be build a team that supports your win condition. Your win condition is how you're going to win. Or at the very least, it's the road to your victory. It may not be a step-for-step map that's going to get you all the way to the end, but it's going to get you into the right neighborhood. Then you just kind of need to check mailbox addresses till you get to the other person's house, and you can punch them in the face. That's how you should think about it. You know, make sure that your win condition is set up and that you have all of the supplies to support your win condition to get you where you need to go. C is know as many safe switches for as many scenarios as you possibly can. Obviously, not everyone has the time and the energy or even just the mind wired the right way to be able to plan out opponent steps, but you have a week to sit around and daydream, and that's absolutely what you should do. Run the match in your head in your off time when you're just sitting around in like a fast food line waiting for an order or waiting for your food to finish cooking or something like that. You're out walking your dog. Just, go through plays in your head. Okay, if he brings in Landorus, what's my best option to switch to? If he's shown that it's a special Landorus, does that change my options? Yes. If so, this is what I do. You would be amazed at how much it will change your mentality if you have all of that stuff in your head. If you've played a scenario through and you know what your safest option is, you control the momentum so much better than if you just go into it and have to figure things out on the fly. Because when you're doing things on the fly, you are doing things in a reactionary nature and you're not controlling the momentum. Even if you happen to make the right switch, it's luck at best at that point, as you're very likely to lose it the next turn because you haven't thought things out all the way through. Sometimes you can gain momentum by that just off pure instinct, but a lot of times you're going to mess up and not make the right call. You're going to forget about some coverage move that you would have remembered a million times over in a daydream, and it's just going to screw you over. Know what you're going to do before you get into the battle. Obviously, some things are going to change if you do see he's running some crazy unorthodox move. But if you have an idea of what he's going to bring and what your reactions to that are going to be, it's going to set you up just mentally to be in control of the situation so much better. There's no reason not to do it. Third and last thing, as far as doing your homework goes, specialize. In a league where counter-teaming is paramount, that's how you're going to win most of your matches, most of your surprises. There's no reason not to specialize. You should not be running the same standard sets you're running in every other Wi-Fi battle. You should not be running 252 on every single Pokemon, let alone half of your Pokemon. I'd be surprised if most weeks the winning teams were running one thing that has 252. You know what the other team's going to bring. You can run so many calcs in such a short amount of time. And I know not everybody likes to run calcs during battle, but in between battles, just to increase your knowledge base, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. You should be doing that, in fact. You should know down to a single EV value what it's going to take for you to live something. And you should absolutely use that. There's just no reason not to. That's how you win matches. You win matches on those moments where you have your win condition in and they think you have them, they have you in check, but you manage to run 28 special defense IVs and live a Thunderbolt that normally would have been 100% OHKO, and then you come back and hit them with a Hydro Pump or something like that. That's how you win. You win off counter-teaming and running specialized coverage for your match. Figure out what your win condition is.
support it well, and run specialized things that throw people off. You know, they may be able to isolate exactly what your win condition is, but that doesn't mean you have to run a standard set and let them get a standard kill on it. Make them work for it a little bit. On the other hand, isolate what their thing is and run unorthodox calcs on that, and figure out exactly what you have to run in order to make that thing go down no matter what. Even if they're running some insane specially defensive set they would never run, just run the calcs and figure out how many EVs you need to put in something to win. That's how you win in the GBA. That's how you do your homework. If I hear another team saying they did their homework and they didn't do all of these things and they're just running the exact same Pokemon that they've run every other week, I'm just going to drop them to last place because there's no excuse for it. It's ridiculous. Do your homework, kids. It's easy, and it helps you out immensely. Alright, we're going to do the predictions real quick fast because the video has been going pretty long because I had to add that homework segment in because people don't know how to do their homework. So let's go through predictions. Week 7, first match, Steelix at Sawsbucks. Going to give this one to the Steelix. Go Pittsburgh Steelies. Better luck next week, Sawsbuckets. Week 2, round 2 actually, Toronto Maple Leafeons at Arizona Deoxys. Given the way Gubs has been playing, I'm giving this one to the Leafeons. They seem like they've turned it around. This week, their big trades go into effect, so they have the premier rain team in the league, and that's going to be a lot of power. It may, in fact, be enough to take down that Celotrain core, and it's especially going to be enough if Gubs plays like hot doo-doo butter. Match number 3, New York Yankees at New Orleans Pelipers. Giving this one to the Pelipers. John is serious business. He is not messing around. He is not happy with that even split ratio he has going on. He wants to make the playoffs. He is driven, and I think, Shady Reggie Gigas is still in his slow start phase and is not going to do well this week. Week 7, Hall Luchas at Grand Bulls. This could be the Grand Bulls' first week to pull out a win. I don't think it's going to be. I'm going to give this one to the Hall Luchas. Next up, Cleveland Escavaliers at Utah Jasmine. Utah Jasmine, I think Cooper's got it. I think he's catching on and adapting, and he's mixing things up and coming in with specific game plans, and I think Nexus is going to bring the exact same Mega Gardevoir he's brought every single week, and I can't give him a win for that. San Jose Sharpedos at Boston Red Sox. This is a slobber knocker of a match between the number 2 and number 3 teams, in my opinions, and could shake some things up quite a bit. Sharpedos have a lot of power. Red Sox have a lot of very specific preparation and the MVP beast that is Hariyama. Is it going to be enough? I don't think so. Going to give this one to the Sharpedos on power because power is power and it's scary and frightening. Next up, Oklahoma City Thunderous and LA Nido Kings. This is going to be another good one. It's two very powerful teams. Alex wasn't able to pull it out last year. Could be the year he takes the Nido Kings down a notch. Right now, I think they got a more better team, and I think the Thunderous have been utilizing their full roster better than the Nido Kings have. I think the Nido Kings still need to mix some things up, but we did see Danza do that a little bit last week. We could see more of it this week. However, Alex has shown a little bit more willingness and versatility to do that, so I'm going to give this one with a very slight edge to the Oklahoma City Thunderous. However, I think either team winning is going to be a pretty good match. That's going to wrap it up for the predictions and this incredibly long video that is me essentially passive-aggressively yelling at a couple of teams that don't fully abuse the format. Thanks again. Sorry this video is probably going to be up a little bit later than normal. Just kind of wasn't in the mood to get it done earlier. See you next week.